Hello and welcome to today's webinar. The title of today's webinar is Test Automation in the Cloud, and today's presenter is Jonathon Wright, the founder of Automated Development Services UK. If you have any questions for Jonathon, please type them into the questions field on your control panel, and I will ask these questions to Jonathon directly at the end of the webinar. You can type these questions at any point, so please feel free to just type your questions as you see fit. These slides will be available on the EuroSTAR website after the webinar. If you want to join the conversation, you can find us at #ESComms, and you can connect with us at @ESComms. You can also connect with today's presenter, Jonathon, at Jonathon Wright. So now, without further ado, let me hand you over to today's presenter, Jonathon. Hello, Jonathon.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. Started. Sorry, unfortunately we had a few technical problems, but we're ready to go now. Thanks for joining us. My name's Jonathon Wright. I've been doing test automation in the last 3 decades. So I started my career at the end of the 90s. Had some exposure to the earlier generations of automation solutions. And today I'm going to talk to you about a very exciting area of how to get test automation into the cloud. So for those who haven't actually seen one of my presentations before, I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction. So typically, my slides are contents. There's a lot of information. It's kind of information overload. So just to give you an idea that quick pace. Also, there's a bit of a competition that's going on if you want to have a guess at how many slides I've got, just tweet at Jonathon_Wright with what your guess is, and you could win an ebook copy of the Experiences of Test Automation book. So, just to give you a bit more of a background, typically my slides have the information, quite a lot of detailed information, and then they'll have a kind of a topic slide, which is typically the question which I'll be looking to answer today. And then finally, an interesting quote at the bottom of the screen as well. There is a bit of delay on some of these transitions, so I do apologize if I'm going too quickly. We've just got a lot to go through. Okay, so I kind of start my slides with this first slide that's just coming through, which is with problems and solutions, because I kind of see that as the essence of what we're trying to achieve here. And obviously, cloud is one of those kind of solution areas where there's an opportunity for different people to actually utilize and take advantage of some of the cloud features. Now, from my previous experiences at webinars, I've experienced that there's a vast amount of different people that actually attend these. So depending whether or not you're more of a leadership strategy kind of position, or if you're more of a test manager or an automation manager, or just a tester who's actually doing this at the end, there'll be different kind of takeaways that you wanted to take from today's session. So I've summarized those there as just a kind of an idea of what kind of areas that you'd be looking at, and maybe hopefully some of the questions that I'll be answering today. Okay, so moving onwards. A little bit of background. So I don't know if for those people who haven't seen me present before, the last couple of years I've been presenting at conferences like Star West and Fusion in Sydney, and I've been presenting on a topic called Test Automation as a Service. Now, this is a cloud-based automation solution that we've been working on for the last 3 years, and it just takes advantage of some of the technologies that are out there. So obviously there's a blog there if anybody's interested in finding out a bit more about tasks. Equally, if you're interested in finding out, going through some of my previous material, there is, my slides are all on SlideShare, so feel free to jump on and have a review of some of those previous slides. Secondly, I don't want to have to go through too much information. A lot of the content that you'll see today will be going over quite quickly, but you'll be able to have access to the slides and also all the slide shots. So you'll be able to go through those in a little bit more detail. So I'm not going to actually go through it now, but fundamentally, like I said, the test automation as a service was all about being able to create a platform, an automation platform in the cloud to create tests, to create test environments, and to execute those tests that you've created. And this solution was born in the cloud. So, the entire platform was developed with the cloud in mind. It wasn't something which we developed for a local implementation and then tried to port across. This was, how do we take advantage of the cloud infrastructure? So, there's quick summary slide that's just coming up. Now, this is from one of my friends, Alan Page, who works at Microsoft, who's lucky enough to be part of the Xbox One team at the moment, which is eagerly awaited for this year's Christmas. And, the way he defines a good automation asset is by these criteria, that they're being relevant, effective, maintainable, efficient, manageable, portable, reliable, and obviously you want to be able to get some actual useful, what I call actionable insights, so some real information out of it. So that's just how we kind of we went against the criteria for that particular material. Let's go share on this year's topic. This year's topic, Mr. Michael Walker officially specified, is questioning testing, and obviously I'm going to throw in a quite an early controversial slide topic, which was going to be my talk topic for this year, which was rest in peace traditional automation frameworks. Now, when I say traditional, I mean client-specific implementations of frameworks. So building a solution for a particular client, not something which we all see as more for community, building a platform that we can all take advantage of. So, I always kind of question why are we all building similar kind of functionality when we can be sharing that as a community. So that's kind of my quick heading, and obviously, there's some more information there if you want to go and have a look. But also, on top of that, I kind of started asking some of the basic fundamental questions of, do you really need an office anymore? Do you really need an IT department? The whole Salesforce model is moving a lot of those internal IT functions like email and stuff that we take for granted every day to be no longer necessary. And if you look at the idea of no longer requiring an IT department, do you need a test department internally? And then finally, do you need a bespoke automation framework when your core business goals aren't doing test automation, they're more delivering a quality product to your end customer. So that was kind of the overall the testing area, and what I've done is I've kind of focused on 10 questions people have asked me out of the back of all the conferences that I've done over the last year about test automation in the cloud. And they kind of come up to me and say, okay, so we go through each one of these 10 questions, and the first one is to say, so how can I move to test automation in the cloud? And literally the room which I'm presenting in now, somebody last week said, can you just quickly draw me how we do it? And I unfortunately ended up taking the entire wall up. Now what I want to do is break that down so that everyone can do this. So one of the great things about the stuff that I'm going to be talking to you about in the next 45 minutes is actual practical implementation. So if you want all the technology of how you actually do it and all the cool tech, then obviously go and have a look at Taz.net and all my previous work. This is literally the practical way of bringing it into a company. And all these examples are real-life examples which has happened in the last month. So, they give you a real feel for how you can actually take advantage of the cloud. So, where are we going? Well, we're going to first off work out whether or not, we're ready for the automation, and then we'll have a little bit look around kind of the cloud and what type of cloud we're going to need for this, and then finally how we get that test automation into the cloud. Okay, so first slide, to what people can see is, are we ready for this level of test automation? And recently I've been focusing on helping out a kind of a community standard called Automation Maturity Model Index, where we can go in and assess where companies are, because I don't believe there's one tool that fits them all now or rules them all. and I don't believe for a second that there's one approach. So therefore, each company is unique at where they are now, today, and where they're going to be in 6 months' time. And half of that journey is to understand, what their requirements are right now and where they want to go. And this is a great way of assessing that, to come in and saying, okay, well, actually, we've got no automation in place. Let's get some acceleration. Let's just get some automation, some basic automation, so we can start seeing the value. And then people start talking about potentially bringing a framework in, or BDD, TDD, ATD, some kind of methodology to go with it. And then after that, you get the, let's actually manage this. What's the value that's coming out of that? I suppose that's one of the big questions is, what's the value of automation? And I think this is where we usually kind of get stuck. And, like I said at the start, I've been lucky enough to start my career span a number of decades now, and I've seen it mature from the early days to kind of modular and data-driven and keyword-driven, and maybe some of the new stuff that's coming out, what I call fifth generation, which is now this concept behind scriptless, but really I'm focusing on the fifth generation, the next generation, where we all work together as the community. It's interesting because out of all the different implementations I've done over those years, I kind of realized that it's no longer just about return on investment, which is what you people start asking. And there's different levels of what I like to call return on effort and acceleration, the benefits of different generations of automation solution, and combined with processes on the maturity area. So I've got some really interesting stats on that, which I'm sharing at the moment, with the test automation patterns, which you may see at the left-hand corner. Okay, so the third question people ask me is, which automation tool, should I use? And I was lucky enough to take a role as global head of automation for a large commodity trading company. And this wall, which you see in the background, is just a sample of some of the tools which they had in place across the 26 different locations. And even more recent to that, a couple of weeks ago, I was in front of a large investment bank who actually asked me about how would I go about automating 500 different applications across 50 different global locations with over 400 automation practitioners. And I think where we were 5-10 years ago is a completely different landscape to where we are now, and therefore it's no longer one tool to rule them all. It is a combination of tools. Or a talk that I did back in Melbourne in 2010 was the hybrid approach, using the best tools and technology at that point in time. Now, through this presentation, I'm actually going to use a number of tools which have just now popped up, which is Team Foundation Service, which is currently a free tool to use, which is up to 5 users. I'm also going to be looking at Visual Studio 2013, which again is a free tool because it's currently in preview, which is kind of the early release candidate. The Telerik Test Studio, which is the test adapter which I'm going to be using. Again, it has a free edition, which is the Telerik framework, which is free to download, and it's very similar to some of the other tools you may be aware of, like Selenium or White or some other type of tool, test adapter. And then also Perfecto Mobile, which is a real devices in the cloud. And now all these are tools which I'll be talking about are cloud ready. So I mentioned at the start there was a bit of a book which I contributed to last year, which was the Experiences in Test Automation with Dorothy Graham. Now my particular chapter in that was talking about an approach called the first day automation approach, which the concept was being able to design and build all your tests before the actual application or solution under test has actually been released. So just for those who've not read the book and have not seen one of my presentations, I'm going to go very quickly through this slide and talk about how this breaks up. So obviously, first of all, is a business process model. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. Some of you may have used these tools before. And this is a way of modeling out the solution in the test or the application in the test. Next, we have a business process scenario. Now, this is a route or path through that business process model through a number of different components or business process tests, which you may have been familiar with back in the old days with ALM and QC and QTP, the idea of making reusable components. And then on the side of that, there is business process data, so the data which drives those particular scenarios. But that's for a moment in time because it's dependent on a build, a client, a solution, a language. The data associated with those paths may be completely different. So that's the first day automation approach. Now I'm going to go into how do we actually do this in practice? How do we become automation ready? So I've noticed there's a number of different ways now. I think you can do these things manually, especially if you don't have the tools and technologies in place. So you can get them from a static source, which could be something like a Visio, something that's already in there. Now, just to give you an idea, just in case you do download the slide pack afterwards, everything that you see you can click into, and it'll bring up a full slide. A screenshot of what that looks like. So just in case I go through this too quickly, you can open up the PDF afterwards and actually interact with these and see what I'm talking about. And these are all practical examples of things that I've actually done. So the first option is using a modeling tool, so a BizAgi or Visio, something which you may have to build those business process models. And the key is being able to export that to something like Business Process Modeling Notation 2.2 or XPDL, so that you can open it in another tool such as ALM from HP or another visualization tool. The second option is you could take it from the dynamic source. Now I'm really keen on this at the moment because it means that as things change, as the solution the test changes, you can literally just refresh it at the source. And when I say source, I actually mean at the code level. Now, I've been really lucky that the project that I'm currently working on has XAML files, which are a workflow format, which allows me to actually understand the logic associated with a particular function. So that means that as soon as that workflow logic changes, so does my overall model, which is really nice because it means that I don't have to keep on working at it. And then thirdly, I call it the cloud source, but it means using a tool that potentially can allow you to generate the business process model for you, so you don't have to do this by hand. Now, that model, when I talk about cloud, I talk about things like a test asset loader, and a test asset loader is fundamentally a tool which, after a build, it goes through and it explores through the solution and the test or the application and test, and then produces this roadmap through the system and detects new functionality or changes. So that way, when you run your tests, you're validating against that model, and you can actually, it helps with validating your test cases to see, well, actually, I can't do that now because there's a terms and conditions screen appeared. So, being able to get that information on every build or directly from the code is really, really handy. And this isn't something that's new. Things like code map features have been around for absolutely ages, which are tools a bit like Sandcastle, which can generate documentation out of code, which can show you the hierarchy of how the code all fits together, and that give you a bit of an idea of how you can interact and what start building your test cases. So that's obviously taking it to source. Next thing, that builds the business process model. The next stage along that is the business process scenario, and that's the path through the system. So again, once you've exported your Visio diagrams, you could put them straight into something like Quality Center or ALM, and then you can literally create a path through that particular business process model. Now that path, which you may see on this next slide, I'm sorry I'm going through very quickly, but there's a lot of content to go through. The little road in the bottom left-hand corner shows you a flow through, which is highlighting in red, a flow through the solution and the test. And you can build many different paths, because I think what's really important, which you may see from my previous content, is that even 4 components can have infinite amount of routes through them with different associated business priority and criticality. And obviously, you can take that. You can also take some of those business process scenarios from those. So again, I'm using the Dino forms, which generate in Excel, and I'm understanding some of the workflow logic through that, and the values that I can put in, the values that I can use from the source. Obviously, we're talking about checking here, which is what automation tools do really well. It's still in the drop-down box. This is not testing where you're generating sanitized data, which can try different values, and that requires human intervention. But being able to build the basic routes through the system, that you can get all that information from the direct source. And then finally, you've got building up those individual business process tests, which are those jigsaw pieces. Now, in that point in time, you can use lots of different tools. You can use things like the HP, what was QTP, now is Uniform Tester. You can actually use, if you wanted, the Telerix Test Studio, which allows you to create those jigsaw pieces. Or you could use something like TAS and use an online in the cloud test builder, which is another feature which Perfecto Mobile has. It allows you to not have to load any tools on your actual machine. You can access and build those tests from a web interface, so therefore you can do it on any machine. Okay, so that kind of gets you to where you're being automation ready. So you've got some information that you can start driving through your approach. Now, I've covered this a number of times, the Manimation approach, and this was something which we did many years ago, back at the end of the 90s, where the idea is you've got to go through a scenario. And I was at the test management forum the other day, and they were saying, well, actually, automated tests can only be created if you can get through to that point anyway. And also they just don't find any issues. And I can kind of see where people are talking about, but where I kind of refer to Manimation is where we can actually capture manual effort to then create automation assets out of it. And this isn't capture replay, this is encapsulating the data associated with those runs. So if you're going to have to run it manually anyway, why not capture all that information and use that to feed into some of that business process scenarios? So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but typically this is the way that I've built it for this particular client, which I'm working on at the moment, and it all starts off at a feature. So everyone's quite used to this now, where you go through and you start off and you've got a number of features that have been added to a backlog. Now, your backlog could actually be generated through a dynamic source as well. That could be you've added all the features into a project like Team Foundation Service, or you've actually taken all those features that you want to do in a particular sprint from a tool such as Project, and you export those into your solution lifecycle management product, and then that way you can start looking at burn down and capacity and velocity and all that kind of good stuff, which we keep on talking about. Now, once you've got these features into your product backlog, you start building work items. Now, everyone's quite used to tasks associated with features. They're used to putting them on the analog board. I've actually got a presentation this evening at the London Agile Test gathering, and we're going through the differences between using a physical board to a digital board. Now, that digital board to the left-hand side is TFS Workbench, which is another free tool, part of Codeplex. But you can view that same information back on a website. And part of when we say I use the word cloud, all the tools and technologies I'm talking about are cloud-based. All the repositories exist in the cloud. None of these have been locally installed, so we're not using a local Team Foundation server implementation. This is using Team Foundation service, which is in the cloud. So that way you can always find information which is up to date. Now, the approach which we've been doing is feature-driven exploratory testing. And I'm not going to go on to that slide, but fundamentally, the client which I was working with didn't have any existing test assets. So part of the process was to go through doing exploratory testing against the actual work items or features. And then that we could then use, we could go through and start building some test cases. Now, one of the great features of Microsoft Test Manager, which again is part of Visual Studio 2012 and 2013, it gives you the ability to go through and do exploratory, and it learns all the steps you're doing. It goes through and generates either test cases out of at the back of it. So you go from having nothing to start building some actual tests around that. So that's really handy. And those test cases again can be viewed in from a dashboard, so I can see how I'm tracking from a progress point of view. And equally, well, like I kind of mentioned, those test cases have associated screen capture information. So so it has things like the screenshots which was associated with it and the steps that were taken, and these are called dynamic data adapters, and we'll go through a couple of these in a particular chat. And obviously it's got the screen captures, but it's also got the action logs. It's got the steps which it took through exploratory. It's got associated video with that, so you can actually, this allows people who aren't domain experts to pick these up and actually go off and look at them. Okay, and so that's kind of the Manimation approach. The next one, again, they're all cloud-based, is kind of being able to provide useful information out of that. So not only do you be able to provide screen captures and action logs, which give you kind of what I call actionable insights, so being able to reproduce those issues and actually be able to see what's coming out of that. There's other features which are built in there as well, such as IntelliTrace. Now, allows you to actually go in and understand at a code level what's actually running. You can actually go down, as you see in that top right-hand corner, you can actually see each method and when a test fails across each one of those methods, or when a test passes. So that way there's that increased level of traceability that not only as an isolated test, an isolated issue happened, you can actually trace it back to what was running at the time. And this is supported for a number of different platforms. Obviously, we're talking around the Microsoft tool set at the moment. But obviously, that gives you kind of issues which have got a bit more information in there, stuff which you can understand and drill down in a little bit more detail. And not only that, part of this move into a cloud-based solution means that you can also see and collaborate when things happen. So in the top left-hand corner, we've got a picture of the team room, which is where people are going in, and as a bug's closed, it's that live feed's coming in there, and people in the team can subscribe to that and change it. And you can also import those. So that takes you all the way down to the code level, where as part of Visual Studio 2013, you can actually be able to go in and actually comment on the actual code itself and discuss and talk about it. So it gives you that increased level of interaction. So that's been able to provide you actionable insight, which you as the business can then see that information in real time, and that's see information that's relevant to you. So that could be how are we doing from a burn down point of view, or that could be a test execution point of view of seeing how we're doing testing point of view. So in this particular screenshot, you can see actually we've got one test that's in progress, and you can actually see that information that's happening in real time. And obviously, as you refresh it, you can then see how the testing's done, and that's live information. This isn't just a snapshot of a moment in time. This is real information. So that's how you provide information back to the business about what you're doing. And some examples, as a bit of fun here, I kind of put in some examples of dashboards which I come across. The thing chat is kind of screen is travel, and these are kind of things that some dashboards that I've seen recently that obviously aren't providing information that's very useful. So here's one, first of all, which is a dashboard, which is, a train station, which is obviously not very useful, even to the bins, which we now have in London, which are, I've got dashboards on them. And then, getting slightly better, I spent a lot of time traveling recently, doing various different conferences. So I've had been able to go in and actually use the in-flight entertainment. But the ability to go in and start using the start menu and stuff like that is quite isn't very good. Equally, when I go to pay at the pump and it's still got windows starting, that's not much use. And also, you can have information overload, a bit like the slides today. You can have too much information when you just want to use the phone, for instance. And you get really useful information, such as being able to see, my friend Ray Ralph, who works for Intel, the other day was doing a presentation on one of the sites. And all the TVs in the office had his photo and what was happening next, and keeping people up to date with what's happening. And then obviously from a final point of view, you've got really useful information. So lots of useful, relevant information to you, and also being able to check the information on the train, or And I've shown this dashboard at a number of places, and part of that actionable insight is being able to get the right information to the right people. So in this particular case, a place that I was working, I was able to. I had dashboards scattered all over the place on these large screens, showing for the developers. What build failure information, and this comes back to kind of the concept of funnel virtualization. So being able to see get the right information to the right people. Okie dokie. Now, obviously, we're trying to maximize time. So moving on to what type of cloud. So the other question that I kind of get asked is, should we move to the cloud? Is this kind of a match made in heaven? And I think it's new challenges and opportunities. And in the old days, you used to be able to see when a particular test machine would blue screen, or you'd be able to see what's happening because you've actually got the physical machine. Now you've got errors that are similar kind of errors that are appearing, like the one on the right, which is from Team Foundation Service, which is still giving the same kind of information, but you're not able to get in there and actually see what's happening. So there's new challenges around everything that we do, and that this next slide shows you a real picture of what that looks like. I think just around something that we use every single day, like Facebook. Facebook is got so many different community classes which are being interfaced with the single kind of the Facebook API. Now, some of these third-party solutions you may have used. Some of them, you may have never seen before. But how do we know that each one of those will work directly with each other, not just with the happy path to Facebook? So there's a lot more challenges with community. Here's some of the challenges that I've seen recently around kind of, just in the last week. I try and keep these slide decks as relevant as possible. So, some of the I've heard about, also I've seen recently, credited someone with 92 quadrillion dollars the other week, which was obviously not a bit of a mistake. I found from just using my mailbox the other day that the date said the 1st of the 1st 1970, which I wasn't even born at that point in time. And then also things like the App Store. When I go in to try and order something, I shouldn't get the word null. The same for things like, when I go onto my Apple TV and I want to see a new episode of, say, Grimm, I don't want to have to wait 11 hours and 5 minutes for it to buffer. I think these are new challenges that we've got in the cloud. But at the same time, some of the cool stuff that's coming out, which are new opportunities as well. So, you know, I've literally spent the last week doing performance testing in the cloud, and literally I've had to be able to check the status of my 24-hour soaks wherever I am, and you know, the ability to check that information while I'm walking through the park, you know, being able to check that information on my Surface Pro at any particular time, or even my iPad is actually a really powerful advantage. And so, you know, this is kind of what the cloud is all about. You know, it's the essence of these instant scalability, you know, being able to just scale up massive environments on demand. You know, it's also kind of, you know, being able to access it wherever you are, on whatever device you've got, or be able to, you know, it be completely portable and be able to be accessed on whatever device you're using. At no upfront investment. And, you know, part of all the talk which I'm talking about test automation in the cloud today, about all the exciting stuff which I'm excited about, is that you can access it without any upfront investment. So, like I said, all the tools that I've talked about today, you know, are free to use and have a free version. Obviously, they have an enterprise version as well, depending on how much you use them. So, moving on to the next one, which is kind of the question 8, is, you know, which cloud should we go to, or cloud type? And you know, Microsoft have got this beautiful kind of vision of what the cloud looks like in a perfect world, a bit like Farmville or something. But you know, the reality is slightly different. And there's a number of different types of cloud type. You know, you've got private clouds, you've got the hybrid cloud, which is a combination of private and public clouds, and then you've got community clouds. And you know, that's where I kind of see the future for us, is, you know, is this kind of testing alliance model where we all work together to provide services, not for profit, just to go there to help each other out, whether that be automation solutions or, you know, capacity or whatever that, you know, the cloud power can really bring. So finally, we've talked about kind of getting automation ready, so getting the information into the format that we need, and maybe some of the tools that we can use what are cloud-based to start building tests and building automation-ready assets. The next step is really being able to run this in the cloud and transfer some of that good stuff to a part where, you know, you can actually use it. And you know, the next question, and the penultimate question that people ask me is, you know, how can I move, you know, our what we've got running locally or, you know, within the business to actually sit into the cloud? You know, this can start off as easy as, you know, just having a VM and moving that VM into a library in the cloud. And that library, you can then start using things like test asset, VM dispenser technology, where you actually be able to dispense thousands of images off the end client, which could be, you know, Windows 7 clients. Once you've got the base image and you've got some persistent storage in the cloud, you can then spin that up as you want and deploy those instances. And the next, so once you've got them in that could be a private cloud, that could be Hyper-V. You could then move them into a kind of a hybrid cloud model, which could be, you know, Amazon EC2, or it could be Azure, now that we've got infrastructure as a service, and also that could be a community cloud. But you know, these arrows seem to be a lot of steps to get there, and especially once you get it to the part where none of the dependencies are actually on any hosted, you know, internally. So Microsoft have recently acquired something called in-release, which gives you the ability to do deployments. So you can literally do capture an entire image of what your environment and the test looks like and move that into the cloud, which is really powerful new feature. So when we talk about Microsoft, most of us today have heard things like lab management. And lab management consists of a number of test controllers which control a number of test agents. And then we're obviously quite familiar with things like Microsoft Coded UI, which recently in Visual Studio 2012, Feature Pack 3 has now got cross-browser support, so you can actually spin up instances of Firefox and Safari and everything else. But in this particular instance, I'm going to be talking about the Telerik framework. I'll actually load that up for a second. It's quite an interesting slide to look at. But the Art of Testing framework, which I mentioned before, which is a free framework, it gives you the ability to interact with all these different browser types and technologies such as Silverlight and Web 2.0 stuff, and again can fit within that lab management environment where you can spin up as part of your continuous build and deployment process. Look at lab management. We can talk about obviously a private implementation of that, but really what we want is the cloud. So infrastructure as a service. Now, like I said, there's a number of different vendors who provide infrastructure as a service, but in this particular example, this is the Azure cloud, which recently, as of last week, have now rolled out their mobile services. So it gives you the ability to actually do mobile testing as well, which is very powerful. But then, once you've got infrastructure as a service, you can start deploying your applications, your runtimes, your databases into an environment which you can manage. And that's part of that continuous integration, build, and deployment, which I was talking about. And, the reason why you'd want to do that in the cloud, not only for, advantages such as performance testing, the other thing is, the test environments are sometimes on off. You sometimes using it, sometimes it's inactive, and I think that's where you really start benefiting from cloud, because you can literally spin it down when you don't need it. And I think there's a lot of hype around cloud, especially, and when really fundamentally it's just mainframe. But over the last few decades, things have really changed as far as that. So, but once you've got the infrastructure as a service and it's in the cloud and you've got lab management, you've got all your test agents and you've got your test controllers, you can start looking at generating some high-volume automation. So you can start sending it tests to go and run. And that means you can then scale that up depending on your how many instances you've got spun up, and then you can start doing some real testing, and that could be geo-based testing, so those clients don't have to exist on the same infrastructure as what you've got in the cloud. And you can also do high-volume mobile automation testing, so being able to actually use real phones, which is what we've been doing recently for the client. Being able to actually inject load, but from mobile devices. And I mentioned a bit about Perfecto Mobile. I'm not going to go into too much detail because they do have a cloud offering, but it also now integrates into TFS. So you can, using those test controls and test agents, you can actually control real devices, real phones that which can inject into your environment under test. So, like I said, I think things have changed much, and I saw this photo on Facebook this morning. I was just too tempted to put it in, but it may be that the platforms changed slightly, but how we do things, the fundamental difference now is the ability to communicate over HTTP, so that we can have things like talk to the test controllers using WCF or web services to be able to tell them what to do and be able to not be locked into having to do everything from a domain. So, the final and last question, I don't know how we're doing for time. Yeah, we've got 10 minutes, so we've got a bit of time for questions. But how does it all fit together? And like I said before, if you go in, you can look at this as a PDF. You can go and click on these different screenshots and see how I've actually set them up and configured them. But the final bit, I talked about being able to create create tests and have all that kind of good actionable insight, and use Manimation to start generating test assets. Now, obviously, when I say generating test assets, you then have to be able to use a tool, which could be something like the Art of Testing, or Coded UI, or Selenium, or whatever the framework is. So, I'm not saying it's the end of frameworks. What I'm kind of talking about is, how we go about it is slightly different, in the sense that we want to be able to create these this information which doesn't care what type of test you're running, whether that be a functional or a non-functional. It could be, it doesn't matter if it's driving a GUI, it doesn't matter if it's driving a mobile device, it doesn't matter if it's using direct object recognition on that device, or if it's using things like image recognition to drive that device. It doesn't mind about that. It's just you're building the models, you're building the scenarios of within that model, and you've got associated tests that you're processing through that model, and they're able to be deployed as part of this continuous build and delivery in the cloud to a build server. And once they sit on that build server, which if for those people who've used things like TFS build server, all the stuff that I'm talking about, all the stuff we've been doing, can be kicked off by an MS build or N unit, or you can control it as part of what you'd normally do as part of a gated check-in comes in, and you want to be able to run that against a particular build and get a quick health check of how things are. If you're lucky enough to be using Windows 8.1, you can actually have a hosted build controller which is local, so you can actually do, while you're checking these things out, you can run it locally and then deploy it to the cloud afterwards to see if everything's will work in both ways. And then obviously once you've got the information, you can then move back into that continuous build and integration model where you can start running these tests as part of an end-to-end process. Here's a great example of some tests, some daily health checks that are running in Team City. Now, that's all great, but as part of what I was saying about providing actionable insight, is being able to provide information that means a little bit more. So being able to see the overall status from a management point of view, of a RAG status of, yep, these particular modules are working, which might map back to your business process model. What's the code coverage from a unit test point of view? What is the test count failure for that particular build? Provide all that information, and that in this particular example, I'm using Confluence. But you can do this within Team Foundation Service. You can provide all these same kind of real-time dashboards about the current status of the builds. And part of that next step is then to deploy the tests on, deploy what you want to test onto the test controllers, and those test controllers will spin up the test agents that it wants over the cloud and start doing the testing. And those test agents could be anything. They could be running GUI tests, they could be running mobile tests, it could be different platforms, different technologies, different automation solutions. Real flexibility that you load these agents on tablet devices, so you could see how it's working with tablets. You could use anything you want. So from a test client point of view, is obviously the opposite side of, you don't want to just do GUI testing, you might actually want to do load testing. So you can use those test agents in a similar kind of way as load agents, and that'll allow you to run tests, those web tests, or tests, even GUI tests in a load profile. And part of Visual Studio 2013, you can now actually run these in the cloud. So you don't even need to build up that infrastructure as part of having test controllers and test agents. The cloud will just spin that up. And I think part of the process, part of using Team Foundation Service and using the load test management feature of Visual Studio 2013, I think you can use up to 10,000 virtual user minutes. So that's free straight away, so you can start doing some quite impressive load testing in the cloud. And then obviously we talked about clients, we talked about the ability to drive GUIs, and that could be different browsers, but also we talked about being able to drive real devices. Back to the Perfecto mobile on the left-hand side, where it's actually driving Android phones, iPads, tablets, Nokia, BlackBerry phones. So we've moved away from that manual one, which is actually a real shot where I had 7 or 8 devices and I was testing them on my desk, to actually spinning those up in data centers in LA or wherever they are, wherever my client wants the actual devices to be located in these racks, and actually do some real testing on the devices on Wi-Fi or 3G networks, real kind of, or 4G networks, to see what the end user would actually experience and not just emulate it. But equally, you could use something like the Telerik Test Studio for iOS, where you actually install that onto, your iPad or iPhone or whatever it may be, and run automation. Again, that's a free product, which you can then go off and do some basic automation on real devices if you're having to use real devices and not the cloud. And then, I kind of mentioned about the open source art of testing framework which you can use, which can support these. There's actually demos. There's a demo at the end of this presentation which you can watch showing how I've done cross-browser testing and also how I've been able to do the continuous deployment of running something locally in my local private environment and then deploying it to the cloud. So, if you want to see how that all fits from an end-to-end point of view, that part of the slide pack there is a rolling demo, but I've noticed by looking at the slides of what's happening there's quite a bit of delay through the transition, so I'm not going to attempt to try video on here. So finally, as I know we're running out of time, I'm going to finish off with final, off the section in the experiences in test automation book was, this is not a hard and fast rule of the best solutions for the cloud. This is a moment in time. This is how things have evolved over the past decade. But we are in a constant state of evolution. So being able to swap out those test adapters and be able to swap out the technology which we're using means that we're not dependent on a particular tech stack. So what's the best for today may not be the best for the next project, and it's always individual. So this is just kind of my experiences of what tools and technologies I've used in the last month to actually be able to achieve a very healthy level of test automation that's running in the cloud as part of a continuous build and integration process. So finally, for those guys who have tweeted, there was 27 slides that we went through. I know it felt like a lot more, and probably that's because within those 27 slides there was 42 embedded slides, which obviously you can go through at your own leisure and the PDF set, which is on the EuroSTAR site, and obviously that comes to 69. So 27, whoever gets the closest to 27 or 69, I'll share you the ebook, which is a very great book for and definitely worth a read. So that's the end from me. There's always a contacts page. Like I said, I'm working quite strongly on building part of this testing community. LinkedIn, my LinkedIn email address is on there. I'm writing a testing blog at the moment where everything that I'm doing I'm also blogging on here. A lot of the source of the information that I did today was from those blogs. And then obviously from Test Automation as a Service, which is a cloud-based, fully functional test automation solution or platform, a blog on there as well. So there's plenty of ways to reach me, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time out. And we've got a few minutes for questions. And then, I'm more than happy to, I think I did suggest to the guys that if there's any questions that I'm not able to get through today, I'll do a blog on the EuroSTAR site and try and answer them on there. So I'll hand it back over to the organizers.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation, Jonathan. I'm just going to now open the floor to your questions. So while you're typing your questions here, let me just briefly run through one or two slides here. This webinar will be available on the EuroSTAR website, and there's also access to 70 other on-demand software testing webinars. By joining our community, you can get access to over 600 software testing presentations, over 70 topical webinars, videos, podcasts, ebooks, and more. Our conference this year takes place in the Swedish Exhibition and Congress Center in Gothenburg, Sweden, from the 4th to the 7th of November. This is our most recent competition here. It's called TeamStar 2013, where you and 3 of your team could be joining us at the EuroSTAR conference. It's very easy to enter. Just send us a short video, approximately 2 minutes in length, demonstrating how your team works together to meet goals or solve problems. And from now up until September 20th, you can avail of our early bird ticket pricing, which will save you up to €200. And you can make even bigger savings when you register a group discount where every 5th attendee goes free. So now we're just going to have a look at a few of the questions that have come through. So the first question I have for you, Jonathan, is what is the cost associated with setting up a solution like this in the cloud?
Oh, good question. So, kind of one of the tasks that I tried to do in this slide was to bring tools and solutions that were free, so they're accessible to everybody. Like I said, each one of those solutions that I showed today has an entry-level product, which is either open source or can be consumed for free. So that allows you to start playing with some of these technologies and see what works with you as for you as a business. Part of this was showing you some of the great functionality within Team Foundation Service and also Visual Studio 2013, which you can download for free at the moment. But obviously, if you're in a different environment, you could be in a heavy Java environment, you may be using different tools and technologies, and therefore it might be all set in the Azure cloud, in the Amazon cloud. So there's different ways, but each one is an introductory kind of solution. It's really pay as you use, which is a great model. So you can go in there and you only pay for what you use. But there's also kind of, as you start in, you can gradually start taking advantage of some of these tools and technologies, which is just fantastic.
The next question I have for you is, what would you suggest as a good approach to testing a cloud-based business, starting from embedded web interaction to VM setup and management?
So I think that's a really good question, because back to kind of the early days where we were looking at being able to start testing things like all those Facebook APIs. What I'm finding now is that GUI automation probably only sets up about 10%. And so therefore, there's some really powerful tools out there, such as SOAP UI, and also tools like Fiddler, which can deal with more of an API/traffic level. Now, if you're going to start doing testing like that, I would recommend start looking at those kind of tools. And things like Green Hat, the ability where you can also do some stubs. So you may have noticed in the end-to-end diagram, which I did, there was you could stub out some of those services. And that's really important for things like PayPal and services where you don't want to actually be doing real transactions, or you don't want to have to pay for a test site. So being able to go through and record that in a proxy and then be able to play that back so that you can try it when you've not got those services available, or you record the services once and then be able to stub them out so that you can use them in a test environment where you don't actually have access to a PayPal server. I think those tools are much more useful. And like I said, Fiddler's a free tool, and SOAP UI from a web services point of view are great from SmartBear, who is a great tool. So, like I said, there's a bit more of a split now. GUI automation probably covers 10%. Integration is a much higher percentage and is much more complicated. And I think there's another slide in there which shows you interfaces. And one of the great examples which I did for a client, they had 720 interfaces. Each one of those interfaces, which were ranging from best of breeds, Salesforce.com, big machines, a combination of cloud vendors. The challenges to deal with all those different APIs and interfaces and calls is a bigger challenge. So I think this is where we start looking at cloud testing for real. But being able to stub out some of those responses is definitely important. Thanks for that question, and I'm happy to put that in on the blog.
Okay, we've gone a little over time, but then again we took a few minutes extra getting started, so I'll take one last question here. The question I have here is, what could be the difference or advantage of automation in clouds in summary?
So in summary, it's when I say cloud power, it's that ability to scale up. I think we've all been quite dependent on physical hardware for such a long time, and also environment. Having large, complex environments under test, and these could be ESAP environments, these could be multiple app servers with load balancers. Being able to spin up environments very quickly, and also in a very quick summary, that actionable insight is being able to take a snapshot of exactly everything that's happening. So that could be all those app servers, all the database servers, and the traffic between each one of those and the interfaces between those, being able to take a snapshot and pass that over to a developer you can then continue with your testing or rewind, an environment 5 seconds before an issue occurs. That's something which has never been available before. And like I said, also being able to scale it up. So if you're finding you're taking 10 hours or 2 days to run an entire end-to-end regression pack, being able to scale that up to infinite amount of test agents very quickly is such a powerful asset, because you're able to provide that actionable insight to the business very quickly. And part of one of the things that I've been doing recently is showing a heat map of the solution and the test, so all the areas that are broken. And I'd stick that on a dashboard, and the business would be able to just walk up to it and go, okay, we know how important this core feature is. We need to put more time and effort to fix that. And being able to give them that information very quickly is extremely powerful, and that's what the cloud enables. Is no more reliant on infrastructure.
We are out of time for today, as we've run a little over time. We'd just like to thank Jonathan for today's webinar. We'd like to thank all you attendees for attending today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. A recording on this webinar, as well as the slides, will be available on the EuroSTAR website. If you tune in tomorrow, you can attend a webinar on big testing from Hans Bualda, who's the CTO of Logigear. The webinar is now over. Thank you and goodbye.